Alex Preddy shouldn't have been carrying a gun, which clashes with the NRA's position that law-abiding citizens have a right to bear arms anywhere they have a legal right to be. So for both of you, what's your assessment? Is Trump risking upsetting parts of his base? Perhaps we could start with Angie and then we move on to David.
If I could back up for a minute to the point about the social services scandal in Minnesota. That is what used to be called white-collar crime. You're not going to solve the Minnesota social services scandal by going on the streets and arresting and detaining dishwashers and day laborers and kids. That's crime in the suites, not crime in the streets. The investigation began under President Biden and under Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. And it says something that the U.S. Attorney for Minnesota, Joseph Thompson, who's a career employee, nonpartisan, and who was investigating the social services problems in Minnesota, he resigned because the Justice Department was pressuring him to investigate Renee Good's family partner rather than investigate the killing of Renee Good. To the point about the gun rights, I think that is a political challenge for President Trump. He said that you don't bring firearms to demonstrations, and that's probably a good principle to be applied across the board. So I'm remembering that Kyle Rittenhouse brought a firearm to what was going on in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and he killed, and he became a hero to some people in President Trump's base. So it has to be that standard, if there is one, has to be applied across the boards. And you do see a backlash to President Trump on gun rights from the NRA and other gun rights supporters. And I think there's going to be a tension in President Trump's base between the populists and the non-populists. And while the issues are different, I think it covers gun rights, it covers interventionism abroad, and it covers whether you have policies that are superficially populist, or you have the kind of policies that people like the tech oligarchs and Elon Musk want. And that's a challenge for him. And it's going to be, I think it's almost reflected in some of the debates between Vice President Vance on the one hand and Marco Rubio, who happens to be from Florida, on the other hand.
Angie, what do you think? Is President Donald Trump risking upsetting part of his base, NRA included?
I think David is absolutely right. And I think both the NRA and President Trump are both correct. Look, so the NRA is saying, anyone can carry guns if you have a carrying permit, if you have a license. Alex Preddy definitely had all those things, and he had the right to carry a gun. Here's what happens. When you are faced with law enforcement, I have a carrying license as well. I will tell law enforcement, guys, by the way, I have a gun in my back pocket. I just want to let you know in advance. That is the right way. That is the responsible way of carrying a gun here in America. Whereas President Trump is saying, look, if he was really a nurse, why didn't he bring a first aid kit to a protest? Why did he bring a gun instead? Why didn't he bring a sign? So he was doing it for the political rhetoric, but there are some realities here. If I get pulled over, I'm certainly telling law enforcement that I have a gun in my glove compartment, for example, right? So those are just those are things. And of course, we discover all of this, in the aftermath of the shooting, and we're starting to see the politics of it. Did he bring a gun to cause violence to ICE agents, or rather CBP patrol agents? So there was a lot of those type of questions. I think President Trump was right to say, don't do that. If you want to protest peacefully, bring a sign and not a gun.
Interesting perspective there from someone who has a permit to carry. Now we're going to set the scene. Midterms are coming up. Angie, do you feel confident that Republicans can perform well in November?
I am 50-50 right now. I think earlier last year, I was very, very confident we were going to win. Republicans started playing the redistricting game. As soon as we started playing that, Democrats played as well. And now we're at a complete wash. So I think that effort has somewhat failed. We have to win on messaging. And, I think a lot of people they are on President Trump's side, knowing that he is doing everything he can to clean up both domestically and internationally all the problems. And he's done more than any other president I've seen, certainly in the first year of his administration. So, I really hope that that message goes through. But I do also know that whoever wins the messaging on affordability will win the midterms. And that's why President Trump this week has kicked off his affordability Trump rally tour. He started off in Iowa talking about no tax on tips. I think he's going to be doing everything he can to right the economy before the midterms. Whether or not that is going to be felt in my pockets, in my savings by, let's say, June, July of this year, I don't know, because I know some economies are very, very slow to react. But I do certainly hope that he gets the messaging across and that real Americans, voters, feel the savings that he is, bringing to America.
David, same question to you. Can Democrats bounce back this time around for the upcoming midterm elections?
I worked for the president whose campaign had the watchword, "It's the economy, stupid." So I would agree that the issues of jobs and wages and prices and affordability are going to be central. And I think the issue isn't just, as Ronald Reagan and FDR before him asked, "Are you better off now than you were a year ago," or some other benchmark, but who is the president and his allies working for? Who do they care about? Who are they in touch with? And that needs to be the Democrats' strong point. I'm looking at a Senate race I'm looking at in particular is in Ohio, where Sherrod Brown, who is the Democrat, has won statewide in Ohio when other Democrats have not, and who has really spent his whole career fighting for working people, for the jobs, for affordability. He's opposed presidents from both parties on trade agreements that were bad for working people. I'm looking to see whether he can make a comeback in Ohio for senator, and I think that will be a very crucial race, and it's going to be very close. I think Democrats probably have a better chance to take back the House of Representatives than to take back the Senate, but it's going to be a very close race. And for all the talk about international issues, for all the talk about what's going on in cities where ISIS had a surge, I think it does come down to the economy, and it does come down to the old saying that it's the economy, stupid. And it also comes down to the old saying that all politics are local and all politics are statewide. And we're gonna see state, district by district and state by state, who people think is on their side.
So central issues for the voters, the economy, right? Yes, Angie?
Yeah. Can I add that there's going to be 45 retirements in the House this year. So the next Congress, the 120th House of Congress, will have the largest freshman class in history. So this is the complication that we're looking at, that I'm monitoring. 45 different races just in the House, and then there's about a dozen races in the Senate. That's a lot of money being thrown into campaigns this year. I hope the RNC and DNC are ready for this big, big fight. And I think that's going to be a real test on where Americans stand today. Is it a referendum on Trump? Did he do a good job in his first year? Now that Republicans control all three houses, how are we doing? And I think, this is a time that Americans have to, or rather the Trump administration really has to listen to Americans and what they want. And so far what they're saying is everything is just too expensive. We can't buy into the American dream anymore. Young voters can't buy their first homes because they're completely priced out. They can barely afford a cup of coffee, and our, credit card interest rates are just way, way too high. I really hope that President Trump is going to put a cap on some of the credit card interest rates at 10%. He was touting that earlier this year. I hope that becomes a reality, and I hope that Congress passes that as a real bill. I know that's a long shot, but that's what I think Americans on both sides of the aisle and in the middle, that's what we want.
And we'll be monitoring the midterm elections coming up here in GNT News. Thank you both from Florida's Republican strategist, Angie Wong, and David Kuznets, former White House Director of Speechwriting for President Bill Clinton, joining us from Washington. Joining me for more analysis is Peter Kellner, co-founder of the UK polling organization YouGov. Peter, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to talk to you, Catalina.
Peter, you recently explored Donald Trump's poll ratings following the Greenland debacle and the actions of ICE in Minnesota. Your recent polls suggest that these two episodes have really rubbed Middle America the wrong way. So how significant are these incidents in shaping Trump's midterm prospects? Tell us a bit more about your findings.
I think there are two things coming out at the moment, Catalina. Let's start with the main thing, which is in America, although we tend to see, on our television screen, the Vox poll, we see the avid pro-Trump people and the avid anti-Trump people. Actually, American elections are decided by neither of those groups. They sort of cancel each other out. It's what I call middle America in a political sense. The people who don't consider themselves strong Republicans or strong Democrats. It's the third of the population in the middle. They went for Trump in 2016 and 2024. They went for Biden in 2020. They're the swing group. Now, all the evidence is they have turned decisively against Donald Trump over almost everything, whether it's inflation or immigration or Venezuela or Greenland, almost whatever issue, then this middle group comes out about 2-1 against Trump. And it is so constant and so similar across all these subjects. There's something, I think, fairly fundamental going on. The second group, which is smaller but to some extent more worrying for Donald Trump, is that the Republicans, the people who voted for him loyally a year and a bit ago, somewhere between 10 and 20%, depending on the issue, now think he's getting it wrong. It's at the top end on inflation, which really worries him. It's at the bottom end on issues like immigration. But there is a significant minority of Republicans now who actually think Trump is getting it wrong on a whole series of issues.
That's right, because that leads me to my next question, because not just the middle or the swinger group, but even with his own Republican base, you note signs of unease with this polling, like the 24% disapproval on inflation and the Greenland issue, for example. So are we starting to see cracks in the MAGA coalition? And how could this play out for November?
Yes, yeah, I think it has. And incidentally, on Greenland, in general, you say, around 20% don't like what he's been talking about. When it comes to the idea of invading Greenland, which he dropped, a week ago, half of Republicans think that's a really bad idea. So he was very wise from his point of view to shy away from that. As to the midterms, at the moment, I would say it is for the Democrats to lose. Remember, the Republicans have a very, very small majority. All the seats are up for election in November. So the Democrats only have to gain a handful of seats to have a majority. And if they gain maybe 20 or 30 seats, which on the current polling figures looks perfectly possible, then they would have a pretty robust majority in Congress. And that would make it much harder for Donald Trump to do lots of the things he wants to do in the second half of this term.
And is this disapproval among independents and the minority, you say, of Republicans likely to be temporary, or is it a reaction to recent events, for example, Minnesota and Greenland, or the start of a deeper long-term shift against Donald Trump?
This is clearly a decisive question. Polls tell you what people thought last week. They don't necessarily tell you what they'll think in 6 months' time. But there's one thing about these figures which I think suggests it may be pretty fundamental, which is on the great majority of issues, the numbers are very, very similar. Now, when I do polls in Britain, if you ask people about, let's say, the British Health Service or British Defence, you'll get very different responses from voters about the different parties and their leaders and their policies. What is curious about America is that on the main swathe of issues, domestic and abroad, the figures are almost identical on almost anything. 3-2 of Americans, by 3-2, Americans don't like what Trump's doing. And what that says to me is that people are now not so much judging each issue on its merits in general, they're making a judgment about the man. whatever the question, there will be a pro-Trump answer and an anti-Trump answer. And by 3-2 on almost anything, Americans are giving the anti-Trump answer. Now, that suggests that a lot of Americans, have made up their mind about his character. And I think you'll find it very, very hard to transform that radically between now and November, unless things really change a great deal.
And let's talk about economics here, because this has also been in the headlines quite a lot. If independents are key to elections, what does this mean that 64% of them now, according to your polls, disapprove of Donald Trump's handling of the inflation? Is this actually a single issue that could tip the balance?
Yes, if it's a close election, I think it will. And the reason is quite simple, that inflation is the top domestic issue. Other issues come and go from the headlines, what's been happening in Minneapolis, or Greenland or Venezuela. But inflation is the underlying constant big issue in American voters' minds. Now, Donald Trump has been saying repeatedly, and he said it again in Davos just last week, that inflation has gone. It's been conquered. There is no inflation. Well, the statistics say otherwise, and people's experiences say otherwise. And so you've got 64% of Americans and 24%, a quarter of Republicans, saying that inflation is a real problem still for them. They simply don't buy what Donald Trump is saying, that inflation's gone away.
And there's another poll, too. I just recently saw one. It's a new Fox News poll conducted in January. It found that 59% of registered voters believe ICE has been too heavy-handed and disapprove of Trump's handling of immigration. Do you think Trump has gone too far with his handling of immigration on these issues?
Oh, absolutely. And you say 59% in this Fox poll. I've not seen it, but that sounds a familiar kind of figure. And I bet you'll find, given there'll be some don't knows, that around 35% support him. So yet again, it's another example, a 3-2 majority against Trump. And what's been happening in Minneapolis has done nothing to reverse that. And if anything, is underpinning it. If things stay the way they are, Trump will do very badly in the midterms. He has got to move the dial back towards it. And the sort of things we've been seeing in the last week or two in Minneapolis or over Greenland, possibly what's coming up if Iran, if that gets pretty nasty and violent, these things are not working in his favour. And I think he's in real trouble.
And looking ahead to the midterms, Peter, based on these poll trends that you're seeing, what scenarios are plausible for Donald Trump and the Republican Party? Could these numbers cost them the House, the Senate, or both the election?
I think at the moment, if the midterms are being held this week, then undoubtedly the Republicans would lose Congress. The Democrats would have not necessarily a big majority, but a comfortable majority. And therefore, anything that Trump needs Congress's approval for, he won't get. The Senate is much trickier because you've got 2/3 of it up for election. These can be quite separate individual contests with their own dynamic. And it's possible the Democrats, perhaps I would say this week, may be verging towards probable that the Democrats could just take the Senate. But I'm far less confident in November about the Democrats taking the Senate as about the Democrats taking Congress.
That was Peter Kellner for us, co-founder of the UK polling organization YouGov. Thank you so much for your perspective. We'll need your polling as we move through the year, Peter.
Pleasure, Catalina.
That's all we have time for on Global News Today. Thanks for watching. Be sure to join us tomorrow for more interviews. Until then, goodbye.
From the White House to Gaza, Kiev to Beijing, elections, economics and the environment compete with conflicts and other complex issues for our attention. In an age of fake news, deepfake and artificial intelligence,
they've got to have a vote and a say.
It's important to look beyond the loudest voice to understand the truth. From newsmakers to groundbreakers,
My campaign is going very well.
presidents, prime ministers, princes and peacemakers, and cultural tastemakers.
As Arabs, as Middle Eastern, we're too emotional.
Join me on The Riz Khan Show for empowering conversation.
Has Donald Trump met his match in Vladimir Putin? Is the president heading for a constitutional crisis with the Supreme Court? And how much economic pain can Republicans endure before the midterm elections? Hi, I'm Riz Khan. Welcome to the show. With the administration's first 100 days in the rearview mirror, let's look ahead to a new chapter which began with a presidential visit to the Gulf. Hands were shaken, deals were signed, gifts were offered, but the path ahead is littered with obstacles on both domestic and international fronts. Donald Trump's already faced a tricky time pushing his big, beautiful bill through Congress and will face further battles with the Supreme Court over a number of his executive orders. Meanwhile, the path to a Nobel Peace Prize seems obscured by the latest developments in Gaza and Ukraine. Well, I've turned to the senior Republican strategist and Washington insider, Adolfo Franco, for his take on prospects for Donald Trump's next 100 days. Adolfo Franco, great to speak with you again.
Delighted to be here.
I'm going to start by asking you, what have you liked the most and perhaps disliked the most about Donald Trump's presidency so far?
Well, I think what I've liked the most is what most Americans expected was to fulfill his promises. I don't think whether one agrees or disagrees with President Trump that one can say he's not doing what he promised. I've yet to see someone say, well, he never said that during the campaign. So I think I am delighted that most politicians make promises and they don't keep those promises. I think the slogan that's being used by the White House is the right one. Promises made, promises kept. What the criticisms, if I may, although I support President Trump, have been that some of them have been the shock and awe, which I understand, is a little bit the awe before the shock, meaning people are stunned at some of the things that are being done regarding, for example, immigration and the deportation and the issues regarding the First Amendment issues of students and the rest of it, which has been the judicial issues that have involved. It's so great to implement those policies, or whether it's the appropriations issues and so forth. And I understand them, but it's been we have a system that we have to respect and work within that system. And I think one can accomplish both. And the president, I think, is coming to realize that after about 100 days that maybe the gas off the pedal. People got the message, he's delivering, but now it has to be done in a way that's within our system.
So I'm going to flesh out some of those issues you
Sure.
raised as we talk. But talking of the 100 days, President Trump celebrated it as the most successful 100 days in history. Right. Whereas, of course, the polls have shown something very different, and he's had record low approval ratings. Even Fox News reported widespread disapproval of his economic policies. Who should we believe?
Well, one has to understand President Trump is not a conventional politician. So people who follow President Trump, and I'm one of them that did since the 1980s, has been an individual that is always promoting himself and his agenda. And I mean that in the good sense of the word. So this isn't an individual that looks at polls and the rest of it. When you hear President Trump, it's always going to be the greatest thing that's ever happened. It's going to be the greatest thing. I know we'll talk about tariffs and other issues. It's going to be fantastic. So it's just his style. And that, of course, has been the pluses and minuses. And I'm not ducking the question here. The pluses and minuses of the American people, they feel it's refreshing to have someone speak candidly, sometimes in a very brash way. But by the same token, those individuals, when they try to put those things in the traditional paradigm, it doesn't seem to fit. And what I mean by all of those words is, this 100 days might indeed be the greatest 100 days of many of these policies ultimately, whether they be the immigration, the economic policies, the tariffs, if they actually bear fruit. In the longer term, people will look back at these 100 days as when things were set in motion and they needed to be set in motion. If they don't, it will not be the greatest 100 days. Taking polls, and I'm a big believer in polls, so I'm not going to cherry pick here, is a little bit like taking your blood pressure. It changes daily, and it changes on the stress that one is under, whether it be economic stress or other stress. So they're valid, but you have to have the long game here.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. You know, having had such a high rate of popularity to get him elected, it seems like quite a massive fall in just a matter of months, couple of months.
Well, I think most of the fall has been because of the economic policies and the economic uncertainty that's been certainly caused, at least short term, by the tariff policies. The president has said that you're going to have at least short term, sometimes even midterm pain. And the threshold of pain the American people have today is very, very low. I mean, they're just not, this isn't the 1940s and 50s where people endured pain or the Great Depression. I think Americans have gotten used to a very affluent lifestyle, and they're unwilling to make any type of sacrifices. I would say the same thing if it were President Biden or a Democrat. So the situation and the dramatic change has been that people have not seen, as he promised, that prices would come down day one, for example, be there for staples or even energy. I think these things are on the right trajectory, but the fact that the particularly economic news has been mixed with respect to stock market performance and the like, people see their 401ks and the rest of it. The expectation, and part of it was set by the president, was that things would change immediately. And they obviously have not changed immediately. I think they are the right policies, but he's right. They're going to be painful at first.
So you're calling for patience, basically, in terms of judging it?
I am. I'm trying to be as candid here. I support the policies. I support what the president is doing. But I don't think that turning around a ship like this is going to be pain-free. It just isn't. I understand in a campaign making a promise, and he made that promise that on day one he would have inflation under control and so forth, has not come to fruition. He can't control that. No president can actually control that. The policies are always going to be mid or longer term. And I do think patience is required. I think the messaging now, I understand it's different than the messaging during the campaign, has been one calling for patience. The president has said we're going to suffer for a period of time. In fact, more recently, he said that there's too much consumerism. People have to stop at what he thinks not $30, but $3, and you don't have to have all these gadgets and so forth. That's a message of some austerity, meaning he expects prices to go up, at least in the short term.
So, Mr. Franco, what would you expect his priorities to be for the next 100 days?
I think the next 100 days are going to be focused largely on and domestically on two issues. The first is, and we've seen the first indications are of making trade deals as we have with the UK. It's not a complete cancellation of the tariffs, as you know. There's still 10% tariffs on some items and so forth, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. The stock market reacted as such, investors, and of course, that's been the message as well for the United Kingdom. So if we move on the economic front, when I say that in terms of international tariffs and so forth, talks in China that are taking place, and so forth, and moving in that right direction, I think we're going to see the next 100 days move, I think, significantly better for the American people. The other, of course, is the agenda in Congress, which is a big, beautiful bill, which the president has referred to, which is a reduction in taxes beyond the extension of the 2017 Trump tax cuts. And he delivers on no tax on tips and no tax on overtime for middle and lower income Americans particularly. That will be a big boom.
Now, of course, politics involves a lot of show.
Sure.
And the media is a big factor in that. But there are some who felt uncomfortable watching the televised cabinet meetings where many of the secretaries that have been appointed by President Trump have made kind of fawning statements expressing awe and amazement about how, the president's been handling everything. Has it felt like that at all to you?
It hasn't. And I think what the president has learned in the first term is he came to Washington as an outsider. He still is an outsider, but now he's an outsider that has some insights. And the insights were learned the hard way. I think Newt Gingrich, our former speaker, wrote a book saying lessons learned the hard way. The lessons in the hard way is that in the first go around, the first administration, he relied on a lot of establishment figures who were not loyalists. I think he has turned to loyalists. I believe that fawning that you referred to is genuine. I believe many of the individuals that the president has selected to serve in the cabinet are individuals that admired him, have been his friends and allies for a very, very long period of time. And I think sending that message that there is loyalty is important within the administration, including individuals such as Secretary Rubio now, of State Rubio, who's differed with him in the past. I think the message is clear, and that is there's a Trump agenda, and if you believe in it and are part of it, you have to demonstrate it.
So then how important is it to have strong voices in the cabinet who'd be ready to advise President Trump if they disagreed with any of his executive orders? Now, are there any voices like that around?
Well, I've been here for a long time, and I do have White House sources, and I am tied to it. There's a big difference between the public show and what's going on behind closed doors. The fact of the matter is, for example, there are differences of opinion within the team currently, particularly on the trade side, for example, and you see it's manifested on who has the greater voice, who's sent to Switzerland to negotiate with the Chinese, who isn't. I'm referring to, of course, people like Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, and Mr. Navarro, the trade representative, and so forth. The same thing holds true with the recent change of the National Security Advisor. I think the president liked Mike Waltz very much, and I'm going to continue to serve in a lesser capacity, being UN ambassador. However, it wasn't just the signal scandal that happened, the signal issue that happened. There were differences of opinion within the security team. I know that the White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles had some differences. So these things are not publicly shown. So there are differences of opinion. And the reason I say that is, had it been in just a uniform message, you wouldn't see this personnel changes. I don't necessarily think you have to have personnel changes when there are differences of opinion, but there are different voices and different opinions that are being voiced within the administration.
Publicly, President Trump doesn't like to be contradicted. Do you think he actually listens to these voices? Is it a proper engagement?
Oh, I think so. I think the president, I know so, the president likes to hear, sometimes I think the president likes to hear arguments among the different members of the cabinet. He does not like disloyalty, but I don't think any president has. I really don't recall. I've been involved in a number of administrations, and I served in the Bush administration. I don't remember anyone coming out and contradicting or the president or having a different point of view that lasted very long. So I think this is consistent. I think in the terms of the Trump administration, why the press makes and its heightened scrutiny of this is because he's not an establishment figure. There's always a level of, I think, trust that the president is looking for, that other presidents maybe took for granted because they had been part of the establishment, had worked with these individuals, had been part of it for a very long time. I worked for George W. Bush. He'd been around for a long time, including in his father's administration. So all the figures that he was engaged with and who he worked in the administration at the key positions, he knew well. President Trump did not, or does not necessarily. So that is the difference. But I don't think in any shape, way, or form that he operates any differently than any other president that demands complete loyalty.
How do you assess Elon Musk's time working in the administration? Is it a job well done or perhaps a chaotic misadventure?
Oh, I think it's a job well done, but a job not finished. Of course, he has said that he will continue on working on these issues, not, of course, to the degree that he's in the past. That was always the plan. That had always been the plan to set these things in motion. I think he's shaken up Washington. Here's what's different. Every president has said exactly what Donald Trump has said. In fact, you should do a collage sometime where you can take words from Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, that have talked about government being too big, too bloated, and that things have to change, and government spending and fraud, waste, and abuse. This has been said repeatedly. In the past, how presidents dealt with this is they would have commissions and blue ribbon commissions and studies and the rest of it. The most significant one was President Clinton when he appointed former Vice President Gore to lead a commission to reinvent government. Well, all the reinventions and all the commissions led to very little. The difference here is there is really now not only serious action has been taken with respect to some agencies, but really concrete plans in very, very short period of time, identifying real abuse, real fraud, and spending that's unnecessary, and proposals to either eliminate it or the president taking executive actions that are in some cases being called into question in the courts to address these issues. In that regard, that has been a phenomenal success. No one can point to me to a former commission that ever did anything but study the issue. This administration is actually taking action on recommendations that were made within weeks.
Well, as a Washington insider, how do you rate Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's time? Would he still be around another 100 days?
I think he will be around in the next 100 days. He has been the subject, the president has said it, of the scalp that I think the left has wanted for a period of time. And not only the left, but others, and maybe the establishment as well. Many individuals believe he was not up to the job. This is, of course, very different than Secretary Rubio's position. And Secretary Rubio has, in the State Department, the challenge that many conservative Republicans question his foreign policy views, whether they're consistent, considering what he's said in the past with the presidents. They are, of course, now. But Pete Hegseth's situation is sort of the opposite, which is there's no question about his loyalty, his commitment, in broad strokes to what the president stands for and wants to do with respect to the Pentagon. Question is he the most capable or capable person, or has the credentials to lead the department? So he's been under an enormous amount of scrutiny in that regard. I think he will be around. I think the president, starting your first questions, which were excellent, the president values loyalty above everything. At the end of the day, if someone's not loyal to you, it doesn't matter how capable they are in terms of furthering your agenda. And I think Pete Hegseth scores 100 when it comes to the loyalty test, and that's what's most important to President Trump.
So were you surprised at the dismissal of Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor? That came as a shock to a lot of people, especially considering the short period of time he'd been in the job. Of course, it gives Mr. Rubio that much more work to do.
Right.
And in terms of Mike Waltz's departure, what does it say about President Trump's, the stability of his cabinet?
Well, I think it's stable. Every administration has some changes. There was a reason, a catalyst, which was this signal controversy with this app. But there were rumblings before, and there were issues that were being raised, I can tell you, within the White House about some disappointment with Mike Waltz from key individuals on the team. So there were questions already. I think this became a reason to do it. I think the president wisely delayed it. He didn't want to have a knee-jerk reaction to the Signalgate situation, which Mike Waltz took full responsibility for. And also, yes, he was removed from that position, but he's also been given or nominated to serve as UN ambassador. So he wasn't shown the door for disloyalty or significant differences of opinion with respect to the president's broader agenda. His views have traditionally been, with respect particularly to Middle East issues and so forth, a little more far supporting of Israel than some of the others in the administration thought should be the case. So I think that was the debate that was going on. I think, again, had the Signal app controversy not been present, I believe Mike Waltz would probably still be in the job, but his days probably would have been numbered anyway.
On that note, Signal is obviously a secure app. A lot of people use it for communications of sensitive nature. Here, of course, information was inadvertently put into the messaging. Do you think that, just again, from the inside, do you think that will affect the way the administration communicates? Do you think it'll have an impact on that? Or is it just simply a case of, again, like with any app, be careful?
I think be careful. Of course, the app has been used in the past. The app has been used in the Biden administration. I'm not the expert on technology. I'm not sure whether that's the right thing to do. I don't think it was a totally careless thing. It wasn't something on just an ordinary app. The big controversy, of course, is how did Jeff Goldberg get invited, a journalist from The Atlantic, or any journalist for that matter, get invited into the chat. I think that was we can debate whether those were war plans and not war plans and so forth. I certainly think that app is not going to be used moving forward significantly or in the same fashion. I don't believe that will happen. But the legitimate question that's raised by Republicans and Democrats is, how does an individual like this reporter get invited onto the app? And that is really careless. And that is something that Mike Waltz took responsibility for, and I think rightly so. In terms of the app, I think there's been some defense of its use, but that's just, I think, covering people's actions for what now will be probably a complete revision of it. Of course, the president has called for that of review of what to do with respect to secure communications.
Of course, I mean, I guess more human error than tech error in theory.
In theory, that is correct. Had the Atlantic's editor not been invited, I don't think we'd be talking about this issue in all likelihood.
Now, I'd like to get your take on some of the administration policies that were central to President Trump's election campaign. Immigration and the border is an area where he scored highest. And there are some people who support the policy and who are very pleased with the results in reducing the number of immigrants and the actions taken. But they're not necessarily happy in the way that the actions have been carried out. Some have described them as kind of cruel and chaotic. What's your take on that?
Well, again, I'm not one to criticize polls because I use them when I've been on campaigns, and I've used them defensively and offensively. So I'm not going to attack the polls. But there are a couple of things about the polls, since you began this conversation with the polls. All the polls indicate that's where the president continues to score the highest in terms of his approval, with the majority of the American people supporting mass deportations, the majority of the American people supporting, of course, what's been a very, very successful control of the border and bring security to the border, although it's not being reported by the mainstream press in the United States the way it should be. It has been a dramatic change. Talk about the first 100 days in that regard, since arguably there were two issues that got Donald Trump elected, the economy and immigration. And you can debate which was the greatest of the two. Immigration, he has delivered. Now, it depends how the questions are asked regarding specifics. And that is, I don't think the American people, depending how the polling questions are asked, like to see the idea of people just being picked up or deported and not having, if you will, broad strokes. And we can debate what due process means and how much due process is necessary. But overall, the president receives very, very high marks for what he's done on immigration and what he's doing on immigration. No one's questioning border security, mass deportations, or the need to get criminals out of the country. Now, you can cherry pick specific cases, how this is done and whether the processes have been followed and so forth. And depending how the polling is asked, then people can say it appears cruel or it doesn't appear just. It depends. But when people know the facts of each of these individual so-called cruel cases, the polling data also indicates the other. Yes, we want these people out of the country.
Well, polls aside, of course, it's a very emotional issue, and people are, seeing the stories that do get highlighted, as you say. The media has maybe cherry picks. But as someone yourself, with Cuban roots, and you've climbed up to be a Washington insider, you're right up there. How do you regard some of the stories you see and how they're being handled?
Well, I'll take it more than that. I'm more than Cuban roots. I'm actually an immigrant, so I can understand the concern of people involved in here. But the fact of the matter is, who's being targeted here? There are two broad strokes of individuals, but the focus of this administration is to remove people who are here illegally. And the priority of those that are here illegally are those that are committing crimes, criminal elements, and the rest of it. We can talk about due process in a moment, but those are the targets. They're not targeting people who are here legally or people here on visas and green cards, except on the other, when you're talking about the individuals who are here legally, those are usually students or individuals that are here temporarily as guests, in most cases. And Secretary Rubio, who is not Donald Trump, has said, you're here as a guest of the United States, you come under the conditions for which you have stated in your visa application that you wished to come to the United States. I can assure you, since I've been in government, and I've been in many, many consular offices around the world, is that if you were to state on your application, I'm coming to the United States as a student and to join an anti-Israel, pro-Hamas activist movement at NYU, your visa application would be denied. That is the discretion of a consular office. And to make sure that the policies and the foreign policy objectives of the United States are not interfered with by foreigners. So it depends what that is in terms of free speech. And that is views versus activism. And those are all going to be judgment calls. And I think on a case-by-case basis, and I understand back to the cherry-picking situation as the thousands and thousands of cases that are involved across the board, be they illegal immigrants, criminals, or those so-called activists, you'd be hard-pressed to just show me a case where somebody just expressed a view and their visas were yanked. These are people who are organizing, who are carrying on activities that I think, as an American citizen, I would not be allowed in Europe or other countries to do.
There are people worried that it's effectively now a weaponized tool, and that it can be used to just silence people, even if they are just expressing an opinion. That's the fear.
Well, might be the fear, but the fear, I think, doesn't match the reality. I don't think that matches the reality. And the question is about visas, and those that are here as guests of the United States is subjective. Under our law, we have absolutely no obligation to let anybody into the country to study, to work, or do anything else, subject to independent review. And the government that's in power at the time can make those judgments. So it's important to understand that. I do not believe people expressing a view has been the problem. It's people who are expressing the views and have turned them into activism and organization and disruption, which of course doesn't get the same coverage, harassing Jewish students, occupying buildings, or fomenting and supporting those activities. Yes, those are legitimate targets for deportation.
So I'll ask you in a line, Mr. Franco, how would you assess the state of freedom of speech in America right now then?
I think it's greater than it ever has been. I think under this administration, and we started some conversations on Elon Musk, I think the greatest thing is X. Just to listen to the testimony of individuals like Mr. Zuckerberg from Facebook. He's no conservative. He's millions of dollars to get Democrats elected, and he said he was being censored in the Biden administration. The Biden administration set up an office of misinformation. Who is the judge of misinformation? You're in the journalistic field. Who decides what misinformation is? Who decides what points of view are hate speech, and who decides that? There's more free speech today than ever. Now, that does not apply to individuals that are here as guests of the United States who are involved in activism. And there are laws that really impede those individuals from doing so if the Secretary of State, as he has done, certifies that they're impeding the foreign policy objectives of the United States.
So on that note, there have been a number of legal challenges over the deportations, and there are circumstances, are there any circumstances in which you think it's okay to ignore the Supreme Court's decision-making? Isn't that going to present a constitutional crisis if that happens?
Well, I hope the dictates and the instructions of the Supreme Court are never challenged by President Trump or any president if there's a clear ruling. And we can talk about specifics if you like. So that would be more than a constitutional crisis. That would be a situation where our system would be really taxed, and it would be a crisis, obviously. But I do not believe that's the case that we have today. Today it's a case of, which is, again, cherry picking, to use that term, where district judges across the country are being shopped. There's a shopping for these people. And the most liberal jurisdictions, typically Washington, D.C., Obama appointed or Biden appointed, Clinton appointed judges who will order injunctions and all kinds of relief on individual cases that are legitimately brought before them. So that's the test that I think we're facing in the country, is that ultimately the Supreme Court, I think, hasn't really fully decided on how to handle that. And there are divisions on the Supreme Court as to who conducts policy for this government, foreign or other policy. So that's going to be the real test. But in terms of the narrow question that you had about the Supreme Court, and you can ask me about an individual case, if it decides something, that's the decision of the Supreme Court. It's not because it's right, it's because it's final.
How supportive are you of President Trump's tariff policy?
Well, I am completely supportive of tariffs in two fronts. As an instrument to get what the president has said is necessary, which is a fair deal for the United States across the board. Tariffs per se, we've lived it through Smoot-Hawley in the 1920s and 30s, are a recipe for disaster. They were a recipe in disaster before there was a global economy, and now today it would be catastrophic if that would be the policy of the United States to impose these tariffs permanently. The president was recently asked, actually at the Oval Office, are these permanent? And his answer was, of course not. So it's to get people to the table as it's happening today. But why it's important to impose these tariffs are for two reasons. I worked on the Central America Free Trade Agreement, and it took years and years and years to resolve the smallest of issues involving agricultural products and a host of other things. What's happened is the system has been manipulated, particularly by China, by others, have been manipulated to give an unfair advantage to many of our trading partners. And that's just, I think anybody objectively looking at that, Democrats included, agree with that. Their solution is to study, to get into negotiations that are prolonged and prolonged and prolonged. It's a little bit like Iran with its nuclear deal, which we might talk about, and that is continuing to prolong discussions and discussion. Well, of course, refinement is, and they're refining uranium, and things are moving along nicely. Same thing with China. You know, China sent it to the World Trade Organization, the World Trade Order, over 20 years ago, and things have been under study, and things have taken whatever, and then nothing changes. All this time, there's an unfair advantage. So there are instruments to get the level playing field. That does not mean to give the United States an advantage, but I think the president is absolutely right. And again, you go back, just as I said about government being too large, too inefficient, and too wasteful. You could hear those same comments about trade made by President Obama, by President Clinton, and President Bush. The exact same comments that President Trump has said. The difference, again, like these first 100 days, the president has acted on them. That's part of the shock and awe, and that is what I think world leaders fear about President Trump. They don't know what he'll do. They don't know when he's kidding. They don't know when he's serious. They don't know when he has an agenda. And frankly, a couple of times he has said, I don't even know. So therefore, you have an unpredictable player in the White House. And I think that can work to the advantage of the United States.
Isn't there a danger, though, of simplifying the way global trade is conducted? It's such a web now. It's so intricately broken up and then yet connected that to kind of label products in a single way. I mean, cars are a prime example where parts come from different countries, they go through different routes. There's no single vehicle that's made in one place that comes in and can just be labeled as a foreign vehicle anymore.
Well, that's true. In fact, automobiles, as you use that as an example, as a case in point, there isn't an American-made car. And Ford will tell you that, or General Motors, because if you have an American-made car, they're going to be parts that are coming from someplace else. That's absolutely true. In the past, though, I can turn the question around, has been, oh, that's an American-made car, either because it was assembled here, or the little tiff that Mr. Navarro had with Elon Musk. It's not an American car. Either they're assembled with parts from overseas, they're either foreign or they're not. So yes, there are complexities, but there's some bottom line issues, and they have to do with particular barriers to our products, and they're barriers to entry, and they're not limited to China. China, I think, is the worst offender in terms of how it manipulates the trade rules, and I think there's bipartisan view on that. But we try to export rice to Japan, or until recently, even beef or products to Britain until recently. So these issues, how many American cars are being driven in South Korea or in Japan, or other, these are barriers. These are barriers that have existed. And for a long time, just the largeness of the American economy, for other complex reasons as well, permitted other countries, as the president has said, to get rich while we slowly got poorer. Ultimately, this was why Asia and large parts of Europe developed very nicely, is because we were playing at a disadvantage. There's no question about that. Those are airlines, the subsidies that foreigners give to their industries, and the protectionism that exists. It just doesn't exist in the United States. So there's a point here, there's a breaking point where that's nice that these countries became rich largely at rules that favored them. He's just straightening and making the rules fair, not give us an advantage, but make them more fair.
Now, you've more or less answered this, but I've got to put it to you this way as well. Views on Donald Trump's tariff trade policy range from suggestions that he's a tactical genius playing four-dimensional chess to the totally opposite view. One quote described it as his team simply trying to stop him eating.
Well, I think he's a tactical genius. The question I have is, how long the American people will have patience for this, and that is a question. To rectify and change the rules is going to be painful. There's no question. There is absolutely no question. If people think they felt it now, if these tariffs come into they haven't. There are pauses and there have been delays and all kinds of signals of deals coming and so forth. But if these things come into pass over a long period of time, over any significant period of time, it would be extraordinarily painful on the American people. It's a little bit like a diet or exercise. The results are down the pike. There's no easy fix. I don't know of anybody. I worked on Capitol Hill for a long time on the Ways and Means Committee and so forth. I don't know anybody who's ever told me that the trade rules were fair for the United States. They recognized all kinds of geopolitical reasons that we had to make accommodations to countries like Vietnam and so forth, and of course our allies. And I understand that, but the bottom line is American workers suffer, and ultimately the country is going to be poorer if we don't rectify them.
I was saying, Mr. Franco, several business leaders have warned President Trump's ambition to bring manufacturing jobs back into the USA on a large scale won't happen because Americans won't want to do them and because the supply chains don't exist in the US to support them. So do you feel that the goal of manufacturing jobs coming back to home is really a visible ambition of the policy?
It's a long-term one, and I think it is visible. I mean, many of the countries that have, there's a notion that somehow Americans don't want to do this type of work, and some 1950s idea of someone in a very large plant or so forth. Of course, today it's a much more automated, it's a much more sophisticated type of worker, and many of the individuals carrying out this work are living in first world countries that are our competitors. So if Japanese workers are willing to do this, if South Korean workers are willing to do this, Canadians and others in Europe are willing to do it, I believe Americans are as well. But the issue, again, this is very long term. The President has said that it's going to be $8 trillion of investment in factories in the U.S. and business returning home. I think that's true, but we're not going to see the fruits of those endeavors for many years. In the interim, there will be pain as well.
Well, that's the thing. I'm wondering, you've said that it's been a very unlevel playing field up to now. And I wonder how you feel that these measures will actually have an impact on America's trading partners, how that relationship might evolve or devolve.
Well, I think they will adapt as well. I think it will, it's hard for me to say exactly how. I think it will be very hard on the Chinese economy. But in terms of the trading partners of Japan and the EU and others, I think it will be a challenge. There's no question about that in terms of the U.S. market. There will be challenges involved in that. I think, frankly, looking for new markets and emerging in other markets. Life's constant change. There are other markets that beyond the U.S. that our trading partners can look for if it's a more level playing field. Also, when we level the playing field, and I think we're doing that with the UK, for example, that's just leveling it. That doesn't mean that people won't continue to buy BMWs and Volkswagen and other agricultural products from other countries. It's just that we'll be more competitive. Unfortunately, I'm old enough to remember when the only foreign car, other than luxury sports cars and Rolls-Royce, was a Volkswagen. And that was a very niche market for people who really couldn't afford anything else. And every car was an American car. So somehow, we've gone way in the other extreme. Does that mean that Japan and South Korea will go into some separate depression? I don't think so. I think China is now the world's largest car manufacturer, and they're not selling cars in the U.S.
If the argument that tariffs will lead to higher prices for Americans and then lead to increased inflation do appear, what is the plan? What is the solution for trying to make it manageable? I know you said there's a painful period ahead, but still, it has to be manageable because policies go on, politics go on election cycles, and we've got the midterms coming. I'll ask more about that in a moment, but what's the solution? Well,
that's an excellent question. The solution is, which we haven't talked about, is tax reform and fiscal reform in the government. Not necessarily just cutting government spending, which people don't see in their pocketbooks directly overnight, but actual tax cuts. And I mean tax cuts across the board significantly, particularly for lower income Americans. As I said, he's mentioned Social Security. He's as a possibility. That's a little more complicated to get the tax off Social Security. 85% of Social Security is taxed currently at the federal level. That's a little more difficult to do. But tax on tips, tax on overtime, and greater tax cuts across the board for middle income Americans. That would ease things. People will see that quite immediately. Of course, whether we touch the corporate tax rates and bring them down as well, it's a way to incentivize the U.S. economy. I think Wall Street and Main Street would both react very favorably to that, and that would ease some of the pressures that will be coming from tariffs and inflation as a result of that.
Do you think the Federal Reserve should be able to make interest rates policies without interference from the president?
Well, they have that authority, of course, and the President Trump's voicing of his opinions on, of course, he has said recently he's not going to fire the Federal Reserve Chairman, whom he appointed. But there is question whether he has that authority. He has pushed limits on some other federal independent agencies in that regard. There's a question whether he has it. So president can do what they call the bully pulpit. He can speak all the time he wishes. The discourse in the country is very different than it was 30 or 40 years ago. People will not say the things so directly about the Federal Reserve, but presidents would voice concerns that they would wish interest rates would go down, that interest rates need to come down. They wouldn't target individuals or the Federal Reserve per se. But the national discourse and politics and the rest of it is very different today than it was 30 years ago or 40 years ago. But it is independent. It has that authority. It does act independently. President cannot influence it, will not be able to influence it.
Every president coming in, and I think almost everywhere in the world, points to the foibles of the predecessor for what they've inherited. Is this, in your opinion, Biden's economy or Trump's economy?
Well, it's Biden's economy now, and for this reason. And I'm not going to say this the next time we have an interview in 6 months or hopefully sooner, but and certainly in a year. But you cannot say, the president recently spoke last week when there was just reports on some issues that came, economic data that came out on inflation, for example. You can't be in office 6 or 7 weeks and say that it's all because of Donald Trump, particularly things such as inflation and the jobs numbers and the rest of it. That's just in the pipeline. So it's it's going to take a few months. What is his is the policies that are moving forward, and that is, for example, stock market and so forth. Reaction is in large part related to what the president says or does not say, for example, about tariffs. But the underlying economic data and what's happening in the economy, it just takes a period of time to move away from the previous policy. So it is still Biden's for a short period of time.
I was going to say, people do comment on how remarkable the swings have been based on what President Trump says when it comes to stocks.
Well, yes, it depends. It depends on the date and where it is and the circumstances. But increasingly, I think this will certainly within 6 months of this presidency, halfway through the year, it will be Donald Trump's, as it was Joe Biden's. It wasn't Joe Biden's on day one either.
Economics and tariffs apart, Mr. Franco, how do you regard America's relationship with its allies? Have they been strengthened or have they been weakened under President Trump?
I think they've been strengthened in a private way, not in a public way, because, of course, the president's strategy is make America great and America first policy. And I don't think that can be embraced in Europe and most other places in the world. I just don't think that they can say this is what we want. It sounds as though we're moving away from our allies. But ultimately, the objectives, and many of the foreign leaders that have been not necessarily Trump supporters in Europe and elsewhere have said as much. What the president is trying to accomplish with respect to a solution with the Ukraine-Russia conflict, I think they applaud. And the same thing with respect to what's going on in the Middle East and even in Iran. I think allies do want the United States to stand up to China, for example, and be prepared to take a leadership role. Is the president going to do this through these United Nations efforts or these formal alliances or so forth? No. I think there was probably disappointment on the climate issue That's legitimate. That is a change in policy. There's no question about that. But ultimately, I think there's a sense that the United States is embarked upon flexing its influence overseas and certainly increase military spending, which he has pledged to do. And I think allies welcome that.
There are those who feel America's muscles have flexed a bit too hard, perhaps. The most northern neighbour you've got here, the ally Canada, a bit of friction with the new Prime Minister, Mark Carney. In fact, he got elected on essentially an anti-Trump stance.
Yes.
It kind of turned everything upside down very quickly, and he managed to get in. How do you regard what happened up there?
Well, the president said, thank God that I was elected. You wouldn't be here, Mark, when you put to Prime Minister Carney. So he's probably right on that. I think the president, again, feels, and that I think he has felt this, if you listen to interviews with Donald Trump from even the 1980s and 90s, that, what does he say, Canada's gotten a free ride, and others. And I think whether it was, in the past has been more of a focus on Europe and NATO particularly in terms of military spending, which by the way is accurate, and every president has complained about it. They don't honor necessarily all their pledges, all the member states. That Canada has been, as the president has said, protected by the United States, benefited from the United States, and yet feels that Canada, with respect to trade and other issues, has taken advantage of the United States. I think that course correction will be short. The president said he had a very positive meeting. They both characterized it as positive, despite some colorful comments that were made. But the president's position, again, you can't view him through the prism of a conventional politician. What conventional politician says they're going to buy Greenland or they're going to have the U.S., Canada be the 51st state? It's just not, it's not in the cards. Ultimately, these sort of statements that everybody is, I guess, a little accustomed to now, but they're unconventional, ultimately lead to some arrangements that were better than what existed previously. So this is the kind of person that goes for the gold, so to speak, and settles for the bronze.
Well, I was going to ask you how serious President Trump is about his plans for Greenland, Gaza, Panama.
Well, I think with respect to Greenland, I think you'll see heightened U.S. military cooperation, maybe U.S. military bases established in Greenland, expanded. And I think you'll see a larger role for the U.S. in Greenland as a consequence of that. I think in Panama, Secretary Rubio was in Panama, making very, very clear that China's influence on the canal and its use of the canal, and priority even in terms of some of the commercial shipping, much less any military use of it, is curtailed if it's going on. And certainly there's been a warning flag from the U.S. that this needs to stop. Again, these are the types of things that I think are positive, and that by taking these steps that are viewed by these states, understandably, as threatening, that ultimately an accommodation is made. And I think that's how Donald Trump, in his entire career, has negotiated his art of the deal, is not the art of diplomacy, but the art of the deal.
Well, there's many who'd agree with you that he's not a conventional politician,
no, of course
not
not.
having had a politician background either, but that he does actually deliver on what he says, or at least tries to. Now, he did say he could end the Russia-Ukraine war in a day. Mm-hmm. That obviously hasn't happened. But the interesting dynamics taking place on that front with Russia and Ukraine are really confusing a lot of people. How did you regard that scene in the White House with the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky?
Well, I think it was a clear signal to Russia that he was not going to be in Zelensky's pocket, or Ukraine was. That was the perception in the Biden administration, I think very clearly, that it was all Ukraine. By the same token, and that was harsh, of course, that exchange. Same token, within 2 weeks, he was criticizing President Putin very strongly, which people said he was in his pocket and he was a Putin fan and so forth. And he said Putin had to step up to it. Fact of the matter now, there are serious discussions and talks, how it's all shaking out again. I mean, when was there serious talk about a ceasefire, or calling for a complete ceasefire, as Ukraine has called for, complete ceasefire? And when have we seen this type of serious negotiation during the entirety of the Biden administration? We didn't see it. It was one of just arming Ukraine and, in many cases, defeating Russia and the Western alliance and so forth. I understood all that, but it certainly wasn't one to bring about peace. Did it happen on day one? No. Did inflation end on day one? No. Is this a work in progress? I think so. I think there's more. No one can point to the degree of progress regarding certainly a ceasing of hostilities That was never on the table, seriously, during the Biden administration.
Did you get a sense that the relationship with Volodymyr Zelensky was patched up at the Pope's funeral, Pope Francis's funeral?
I think it was patched up before. I think much of this is for, when I use the word posturing, I think it's a signal to the world of the United States being willing to take a dramatic change, but at the same time, ultimately, not going to abandon Ukraine. So I'm not dismissing it as hot and cold. I calculated, but it wasn't as harsh as it seemed. I think it was just a question, again, of Donald Trump saying, I mean business, and we need to get this done. And this isn't going to be prolonged, and you can't count on the United States. I think President Zelensky said it. We want an honest broker, but want you to be more on our side. I understand what he was saying by that. His answer was, no, I want a deal on this. And that is a change in policy. So I don't think the Pope's funeral is where they patched it up. I think it was patched up even before.
Actually, a lot of people are surprised at J.D. Vance's intervention there at the White House. That was the one I think surprised a lot of people. So
yes, it was a curious one. It was I think J.D. Vance, of course, is seen by many in the Trump movement as not only the vice president, but will inherit the MAGA movement.
We'll get on to that in a second. But when it comes to Vladimir Putin, as you indicated, President Trump wasn't necessarily so happy with the lack of response from President Putin. In fact, the suggestion he was played has come up, and I think he used the term tapped along, by President Putin. Who has the upper hand at this stage, do you think? And how will President Trump react if it's Vladimir Putin who seems to be holding the cards?
Well, I think ultimately the Ukraine has the upper hand. I really believe that, because at some point, despite the signals that have been sent by the United States, it can be back on again, to use that expression, meaning there's an eagerness, particularly in Europe, to make sure that Ukraine has strong support, to say the least. And I think the United States is prepared, if there isn't movement from Russia, to simply say, you will see the same harsh rhetoric directed more harshly toward Putin, and say they're not serious about it, and the only way they're going to be serious about it is if Ukraine is now strengthened and the position has become hardened. So I think ultimately, I think the advantage is with Ukraine. I really believe that.
Although President Trump did get to the stage where he said, look, we'll just walk away from this if we have to.
Yes, he has said that, but the United States will not walk away from it. Even that is a threat, really, to both sides. Obviously, the Russian side is, despite everything they've made, I know it's a war of attrition, it remains very, very difficult for them to actually seal the deal with respect to Ukraine. They would have done it long ago.
As someone who obviously knows Donald Trump and how strong he is as a character, what chance is there he's met his match with people like Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Mark Carney in Canada?
I don't think he's met his match. I think, of course, those countries, particularly China, to some extent Russia as well, is those economies and their military prowess is really we have to take into account more than the personalities involved in it. I don't think he's met his match. I don't think he's worried about that. Certainly with the Prime Minister of Canada, he is now. With Prime Minister Carney, I don't think he is. However, I do believe that President Trump, and I do know him in this regard, is if he feels that he's not being taken seriously, or people have gotten the upper hand, or they're willing to not take what he said as something that they need to engage negotiations with, then he'll up the ante significantly. And I think he has with China, of course. We haven't talked about China, what's going on internally in China, but I don't believe the Chinese economy, despite what they're saying, is growing by 5%. I just don't believe it. I don't believe anything coming from China, period. So 145% tariffs on China, idle factories and so forth. We don't talk much about their pain because it's a closed society. And the same thing with respect to Canada. Ultimately, Canada's the biggest loser. Canada has 40 million people. We have nearly, not quite, but nearly 9 times the size of the population, and the economy is greater. They need the United States more than we need them. Keep in mind that the size of the Russian economy is the size of the economy of Texas. So at the end of the day, the leverage isn't just the personality. I think President Trump's personality and his willingness to use power in an unconventional way or to threaten its use, I think, is an important component, and that's factored in. But ultimately, it's the United States of America today still remains the superpower.
Could a nuclear deal with Iran actually be easier than getting the peace deal for Ukraine?
I'm not certain about that, and it will depend. These next few days, next weeks, it will be very, very critical. The problem with the Iran deal is trust but verify, and I'm sorry, I don't believe that the previous agreement by the Obama administration was the kind of verification that I think is satisfactory to President Trump of the United States, despite what was being said. So with Iran, I think the fear is delay. Again, I've mentioned that before. Indirect talks, direct talks. These talks have been fruitful today, but remember, Iran just a few weeks ago had said it would only engage in indirect talks. And then, of course, direct talks took place. So it's a question of not only talking, but action. We keep hearing Iran is just a few weeks away from the development of nuclear arms. The people have been saying that for years. So you have to start assuming that they either have them or about to have them. So time is running out. And that is why I don't think it's necessarily as easy, because any deal, a real deal with Iran, a real deal will require Iran to cease refinement. And the Iranian positions have been hard on that to date.
Well, Donald Trump has talked about wanting to serve a third term. Would you like to see that?
Well, he said he wouldn't. He just recently said that it looks like we'll be over in 4 years. Obviously, Constitution impedes that. I think.
I was wondering whether you'd like.
Oh well, yeah, I would like to see that. But I think there are those. You mentioned the vice president. Those that are now have genuinely in the last 8 years. I wouldn't have thought this 8 years ago, but because they've seen what's happened to the Republican Party, I think it's very difficult to see how a Republican can win the nomination and support the majority of Republicans without being a Donald Trump MAGA supporter. Not a Trump look-alike or act-alike, but in terms of the policies, they had to be very similar.
And you see J.D. Vance as a worthy successor?
I do see J.D. Vance, and I know that Donald Trump Jr. was critical in selecting then Senator Vance, who many people believed was the wrong choice. They were looking for diversity of women, minorities, and so forth. And that was even true to Donald Trump not being hypocritical and putting a woman on the ticket, or a great person, Senator Scott, who was African American from South Carolina. So that in and of itself was an indication that a loyalty test to the MAGA movement was paramount.
Well, there's been a lot of wrangling internally with the Democrats in how to deal with the Trump presidency. Could you see them actually getting their act together and putting forward a sort of cohesive plan to challenge the Republicans?
They could, but I don't think they will. Every indication is that the party tends to want to move more to the left. The leading voices, at least speaking right now, are again Senator Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The more extreme views in the Democratic Party seem to be what is dominant at this time. I believe the Democratic Party could be quite viable if it were a centrist party. I really do believe that many of the things, if it were genuinely were embraced, such as immigration policy, things that are important to the American people, this, broadly speaking, wokeism and cultural issues, if those were tempered in many ways, I think the Democratic Party would be very viable. I just don't see in the primaries the Democrats doing so.
What do you expect to happen in the midterm elections?
Well, the midterms, of course, are always terrible for the party in power. And I say always, I should take that back. I was involved in midterms in 2002 when they weren't. We picked up seats, but that was after 9/11. And there are times where one can do well. President Biden did fairly well on his midterms. But the margins are close in the House, particularly, and they will hinge totally on tax policy and tariff. It will all be economic issues, barring a catastrophic terrorist attack or a type of conventional war we haven't seen in many decades. Foreign policy issues never dominate on our elections unless it's a catastrophic event.
But you have the issue of the pain of the economy. Yes. And I wonder, you might reach a stage where the Republicans start to say, hey, we're going to lose our seats unless there's a change in course.
I think there's already sentiment in that regard. And you see it without getting into the weeds here. You see it with respect to the SALT tax, which are taxes that are imposed on real estate and so forth on certain key states to hold on to key districts in New York, for example, and in New Jersey. And so that is a fear for the elections. That pain window for Republicans in the House is short, much shorter than President Trump, and we'll see how that shakes out. That's why tax policy and tax reform is going to be critical. They need to deliver.
To wrap this up, I'm going to bring it full circle to where we started.
Sure.
And I wonder how you regard the fact that so many people are surprised that Donald Trump did actually deliver or tried to deliver on the promises he made in the campaigns.
Well, I think they're surprised because they don't, even though they see him as a non-politician, they still don't expect politicians to deliver. And he did deliver on these things. Now, there are two types of reactions to it. To those of us who support President Trump, we're delighted. True to his word, this is what he said. He has not retreated in any shape, way, or form. In fact, more so than he promised when he talked about tariffs and so forth, but he didn't waffle on these issues. To Democrats, and that's why the country continues to be polarized, that's that shock value is, this is why we opposed him, and this is now very fearful. They're very fearful of what it means for the country, and they had wished he had not and didn't expect him to do so. So again, it's back to almost November of last year, the country being quite divided. Either this is the course we want to go on, and he's delivering, or this is exactly what we feared.
Adolfo Franco, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Interesting insights there from the senior Republican strategist and Washington insider, Adolfo Franco. And that's it for this episode. I'm Riz Khan. Please do subscribe to the show and leave us any comments and feedback. From me and the team, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
It feels like decades are passing by in a matter of weeks. Seismic shifts in the world order.
Never, ever will be part of America. With so much happening and so much noise.
Whether it's political upheaval,
Canada has been ripping us off for years.
Economic shifts or social movements.
And no one wins from tariffs.
I think America can be more friendly to the rest of the world.
For in-depth analysis and all the latest developments across the globe.
To have an inclusive policy together.
The meetings with Hamas gave me some hope.
We're in another nuclear arms race.
The most important development straight to your screen.
Welcome to the dressing room.
I'm on my own. I need backup.
And an insightful look at the issues shaping our world today.
It was not going to happen, that war, and it happened.
Join us on Arabiya News, where the world talks.
I wish reality were as easy as talking. He grows up but keeps that innocence. That's the instinct God created us with. Mahmoud's dream is to become a pianist.
Is speech the only way to express thoughts and feelings? Descartes, the father of modern philosophy, said, "I think, therefore I am." He didn't say, "I speak, therefore I am." There are many means of communication around us: drawing, music, singing, writing, sports. Even eyes have a language. Each one of us is different. We share many things and differ in many others. The same applies to autistic people who can be similar or different. Since medicine discovered autism 8 decades ago, half of people around us still see it as a mystery. And such people do not try. to know anything about autism. Even scientists disagree over it. Some see it as a psychological or neurological disorder, while others consider it a genetic biological problem. Why don't we know a lot about autism? Today, we try to reach them. We are not looking for a cause, a doctor, or a cure. This will be a special mission in which we go to them to find out their thoughts and feelings. Do they live in the moment only? Or do they dream and wish? Do they understand adolescence? What is lying? Or politeness to them? Do they know they are different? We thought it would be enough to get answers even to some of those questions. It's impossible to reach everyone, but it led us to a few of them. A young man living in his 20s, and in his story, a message for every human.
I exactly experienced the entire 5 stages of Kubler-Ross. I experienced every single stage. Starting with denial, I experienced this stage in the sense that I cannot believe that my son has autism. There is nothing wrong with my son. It must be a stage that would pass. You know how mothers might fool themselves. They pretend that there is nothing wrong, then there's the stage of anger. The anger stage involves questions like, why isn't he interacting? Why should Mahmoud be autistic? Even though I never asked myself or God about why I had to go through this.
When I was young, my father used to sing for me in the car. I love you when you speak. I love you when you draw a smile. شو بحبك لما بتحكي ترسم عشفافك ضحكي شو بحبك لما بتبكي بتشكي وعم بتغلغل فيه حبيبي انت الأحلى عمري بقلبك عم بيحلى عطرك سحرك صوتك رسمك صار مني وفيك.
Sometimes I thought about committing suicide. I wished death for me and my son, but my death wouldn't change anything. In the end, my son would be left alone, and that's not what I want for him. When I felt that I was fed up, as they say, I could no longer bear this angry and depressed fate. That's when it started to search for psychological solutions. Thus, I studied psychodrama therapy, because I was convinced that I wouldn't heal. In 1 or 2 sessions, or even in 1 or 2 years, I was convinced I needed to know how to face my feelings and understand my psychological condition throughout my life, because I knew my current situation would continue all the time.
شو حلو حبيبي شو حلو هالقمر شوفوا ما أجمله بس أنا عبالي دللو وحياتي ما حدا بقى يزعلو. I don't like hurting anyone.
أوقات الدنيا بتوجعني وساعات بتعاند ويايا لا بخاف وحخاف ازاي يعني دايما مطمن طول ما انت معايا.
During World War II, a psychiatrist was influenced by the power of compassion and resilience in human spirit. In 1969, she introduced a model named after her, about the 5 stages of grief. Through this model, Kubler-Ross wanted to speak out loud about the feelings a person experiences when faced with a shock that shakes their inner peace. The transitional stages in the Kubler-Ross change curve begin with shock, which leads to denial. Then anger takes hold. Then we begin bargaining with ourselves in a one-sided dialogue. We want to escape the crisis without making any effort. Then comes depression and sorrow. Despair and all negative thoughts start to attack at the same time. Acceptance is the beginning of the solution.
And out of love for her son, she feels hatred. She thinks she hates her son, but in fact, that represents in psychology the stage of anger in Kubler-Ross model. She becomes angry with herself because she feels those emotions, which are unfortunately normal. If we had psychological awareness in education, she wouldn't be blaming herself. Once I reached the stage of acceptance, he started to show results that I had been waiting for years of effort. He started to show me those results. I reached a state of acceptance that it's over. I accepted him however he is, whatever progress he makes or doesn't make. That's it. This is my son, and I want to love him just the way he is. And that is the golden key.
I accepted Mahmoud as he is, like any mother who wanted him to lean on her. But what happened was the opposite. Fatin's dreams of Mahmoud graduating from university with a postgraduate degree did not come true. Mahmoud opened a door to his world for her, and he amazed her and made her forget the routine life and the struggle, competition, and racing against time in everything.
I used to be afraid that something might happen to me. And how would Mahmoud eat? He doesn't know how to say, "I want to eat." He wouldn't say, "I'm thirsty. I have to bring him water." But what worries me is his perseverance. Mahmoud has overcome it, thankfully. Thank God, you could say.
Do you consider that the great achievement was by Mahmoud or Fatin?
It was definitely by Mahmoud. We honor mothers in our society, and we see the efforts made. But, unfortunately, we don't understand the value of that effort because they struggle just like we do. They struggle with themselves. It's not something easy for them from the start. It's not easy for them because we are breaking their nature. In fact, I'll tell you more. We are distorting them. We are distorting their nature so that they become like us.
Due to the commonalities within the stories, we went to Niraj, a young boy who is talented in drawing and video games, a boy no older than 12, who speaks, reads, and writes. He has a small home, with a family, school, and friends.
At this time, I don't know nothing about the autism, so I was just thinking why he don't talk. Why he don't talk? Because he was speaking, eating good, sleeping good. I think when I call him, he don't come. I say, Niraj, he don't look at us, don't come. So one day, when he was 3 years old, with nothing, no speak, he just making sounds like. At this time, I don't know nothing about autism. I know autism only. I know some children with development problem have autism. So when I come back home and I went to the internet, this is something wrong. You never have to go to the internet to check and solve your problem. Oh my God, what only bad things about autism only. But there I see a picture of my son.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I would say so. I would say that, I mean, being in denial is kind of running away, isn't it? It's an indirect way of saying you're running away if you are in denial. You know, maybe you're in denial because subconsciously you know it's true, but maybe you're in denial because maybe you don't know what to do, so you panic. And it's definitely Artemia is what woke me up. You know, kind of she would bring me back down to earth, saying, this is not going to go away. He's not going to snap out of it. It's not something that there's no medicine that we can just give him and he's going to be okay. And then I would see what she's doing. And that's, then that was like kind of the inspiration to, I want to be part of this journey and help where I can. That's basically how I transitioned from not doing anything into trying to do something. I see myself as a father to Niraj, not as an autistic child, but as a normal child, which gives me an oversensing comfort. So it's not I should do more with Niraj because he's autistic. It's more, I should just do more with him just because he's just another child. So I think now I'm not beating myself up because he's autistic, and I think that's a testament on how far he's come.
When he was 5, we take him to one psychologist, and she told me, "Oh, you have to understand because you will never talk. He gonna be adult with the mind of the child." He just told me like this. My son is talking now. If you say that for one mother, you take her hope. Yeah, your hope. You need to give hope. You need to say, "Oh, buy this book. Oh, do this, do that. Come back here. Let's do something." They need to be positive.
I've never had pets. I'm not a huge pet lover, but I did try, and whenever we take him to the park, try and push him towards the dogs in the park. And yeah, he liked them a lot. And now we have cats, so he's plays with them as much as he wants. I did try to play football with him. He doesn't want to play. So then I just kind of revert back to what he's interested in, and because at the end of the day, that's how you maximize engagement with anyone.
The doctor tried to steal her hope, but she failed twice. As a doctor, and as a human, that's what happened to Artemia. She lost herself chasing books and sources for guidance to reach her son. Her mission wasn't easy, and notably, the majority of books written about autism were written by autistic people themselves.
One of the therapists told me we have to make some exercise with him. You put some up with the hot water, no, very hot water. Yeah, one is something like lemon. Or do this exercise as many as you can. Okay, show me phone. Good work. Show me cooking. Good work, Niraj. Show me jumping. Good work. Coloring pencil. Good work, Niraj.
She pulled hope out of pain to get her son to read, write, and draw, and express himself, even participate in competitions with others. They are not in their own world. They are in ours.
How did they help Niraj?
Oh yeah, definitely. So when we have games that involve, but mainly those kind of group games, is definitely you bring them in, and the kids don't know they're doing it. The kids don't know they're helping. For them, they're just playing.
Was very difficult, was very depressed in the beginning. And now I see my son, he can talk, he can ask what he wants, he have good behavior outside, he learning many things. I like my son like this, I want him like this, I don't want another son. I don't want a perfect Niraj. He's perfect for me.
They don't know they are different. We are the ones who create the difference. Many realize this truth. Nahed, the mother who wants to help them reach their fullest potential, to discover their skills without differences and bullying.
I am Nahed, a mother before anything else. I built this entire place. dreaming of a space where Ahmed could live, where I could watch him grow. My dreams, like any mother, were very big. Unfortunately, after I started this place, Ahmed's needs were different, and today Ahmed. What exists in this place? But the place has become for all the Ahmed in this world. I now have more than one Ahmed. I have Ali, I have Khaled. They call me Mom, and my son does not talk. After my long journey with Ahmed, he stayed the same. I was the one who changed. So I wanted to change Ahmed, but Ahmed won't change. Ahmed granted me exponential strength to be the person I am now, capable of helping all these people. I really do not see myself as strong. Is there a greater strength than that? This is Ahmed's strength, although considered as disabled, but they are not weak. They deserve to live. We all have our own kind of disability. The only thing these children fear is losing their parents. They fear because we have become their safety, not the society. The community as a whole must change so that children feel safe. Then comes competition, and there comes desire to achieve self-worth. Children do not feel safe. Their safety is us. So we must give our children safety before we ask society to give them safety. A group of young men graduated from our center are now working in government agencies, in Emicor, and some working at Siemens Energy, with very good salary, comparable to university, graduate salaries. These children must have experience and skills so that they can compete in the labor market according to their capabilities.
My name is Andrea, and I'm 18 years old. I consider myself as a kind person. I love helping everyone who seeks help. I enjoy spending time with my family. I believe there is love inside every person. Each person has a beautiful soul within them. How would you describe Mahmoud? He is a kind person and musically talented. He plays the piano and sings, and he is also handsome.
How do you describe Andrea?
She is my friend. I love her very much. She plays the piano and the guitar.
I was studying a major that I love. I was easing my conscience as a mother by studying something that could help my son. We can manage behavior either with reinforcement or punishment. When we know which reinforcement is best for the child, we can use it to teach the child to ask and express themselves. It is not necessary to express by talking, because many autistic do not speak. So we can use pictures, or we can use an iPad, to be able to communicate with them, and they can communicate with us. This skill is one of the most important things we teach a child. It's one of the foundational skills we begin with for a child. Honestly, the early stages were the hardest for me. I used to repeat sessions that he learned with the specialist every day. I would reapply the speech sessions with him 4 times a day. I used to repeat them on the same day. At the times when I could not do these sessions, I would repeat them through activities I would do with him at home. So when he became responsive, when he was ready, when he became ready to expose him, experiments to find out what does he like, so we tried To experiment and discover what he liked, we began teaching him the field of computer and software, and we tried exposing him to all fields until we discovered that Mahmoud was excellent at playing piano. He can express himself, his anger, his joy through playing the piano.
What if we were asked to pause for a moment and put on the shoes of this mother or sister or that father or brother just for a moment? What if we realized that one of our children is on the autism spectrum? Everyone we spoke to never wished to switch roles. Instead, they asked of those around them or those they encountered on the street or in the store or the cinema or school. Anyway, they wish to grant these passes by the children with autism a little understanding and a little love.
It pains me to see him grow up, still with that same innocence and childlike nature. Maybe because I'm afraid for him, afraid of his innocence, the purity of his thinking, his unconditional love for people, and his lack of awareness of the evil in this world. The initial phase is exceptionally challenging, initiating them with their first word, the first letter. It's a very challenging stage. It's one of the most challenging stages. The challenge of adulthood is also affected.
And I want to say to the ones who abandon their children, go back to them. They need you. Do not be ashamed of your children. Your son may not be what you dreamed of, but they become something you never dreamed of before. I am really grateful for his presence, no matter what he is. Of course, I wish he does not suffer from autism. I cannot imagine my life without his presence.
What do you want to say to Dad?
I played the piano.
If you want to talk to him but he is away,
I call him.
what do you tell him?
Come. I love playing piano and drawing and sports and swimming.
What do you do in the kitchen?
I make a labneh sandwich.
صعبة في أولها مع بعض أنا وأنت أكيد هنكملها
Our allies, in many cases, are worse than our enemies.
Stay informed and connected with the latest international headlines.
There obviously is a risk.
From breaking news to in-depth analysis, it would appear that this war is coming to an end.
Who buys this stuff? Investors, pension funds.
We deliver the most important developments straight to your screen.
Iran always wanted to deal with militia.
Join us for compelling, expert-driven conversations.
A curfew order has been established.
And an insightful look at the issues shaping our world today.
There are a lot of proposals about European architecture for security.
I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans, and this is W News.
We dealt with this when I was Chief of Staff in the first term.
Where you don't just hear the headlines, you get the full story.